Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything, and you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on, it's gonna be fun.
Alright guys, today's date, November 6, 2021, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, Will Buchanan. On How the Frack We Got Here, we do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we get started, this is a family-friendly podcast. We do try to watch our language as well as, we try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. Apologize for that. And some things that we may show, although they may be the news, they may be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. So, how do we actually start with this shindig? Well, as you guys know, the Republicans gave the Democrats quite a scare with some elections that happened in New York, and Virginia, and New Jersey. Well, it seems like whenever there's Republican gains, the Democrats finally want to do their jobs.
The yeas are 228 and the nays are 206. The motion is adopted.
Now, you're probably wondering why they're all clapping, hooting, and hollering like they just left a Dave Chappelle concert. No, that was actually the Democrats finally voting to pass their $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. You know, that was the House because, the Senate had already approved and passed this bill, which feels like years ago, but actually was just a few months ago, that the Democrats finally decided that, hey, we might want to do our jobs. In which they did vote 228 to 202. It was actually voted 228 to 206. For the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill to be passed. Again, the timing of this all. Keep in mind, just this Wednesday, we just sat there and found out that Virginia now has a Republican governor. New York does have a Democratic mayor. And actually, I'm going to cover this a little bit later, about New Jersey, about the very close election call that happened there. Now, keep in mind, Virginia, New York, and New Jersey were all places that Biden had won by double digits, which were all challenged by Republican competition. And again, we'll cover that a little bit later. But imagine that again, Democrats. This is the problem I have with you guys. It took Republicans to remind people that you guys weren't really doing anything. And that when you finally and that when they finally get some gains somewhere, Democrats are going, oh crap, we need to pass this as soon as possible. And what winds up happening? Well, you pass the 1.2 infrastructure bill. But a lot of you probably wondering, because you hear a lot of numbers being thrown out there, 1.2, 3.5, $2.2 trillion. Understand, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill was for roads and bridges and other infrastructure needs in the U.S. This was actually already decided a long time ago. It was just the infighting between Democrats in the Senate and Democrats in the House. It was already a fight between both of them, in which the progressives in the House still want their Build Better Back Business, Build Better America, Build Back Better plan to be, again, voted on. And it's not surprising in this plan, keep in mind, going back to the $1.2 infrastructure bill, that 6 Democrats voted against it. Right, and of course they're all progressives. Cory Bush, Jamal Bowman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Aylin Pressy, Rashida Tlaib, all progressives known as the Squad, which in the House, which again, I love all 6 of those people because they're very progressive and they actually have some ideas that really need to be pushed forward in the Senate and the House. But the deal was with Pelosi that Pelosi had sat there and said, with the House, that yes, we will vote on the Build Back Better plan, but we want you to vote on our plan that we've already got in place, and we need that plan approved before we can do the Build Back Better plan. In which the Build Back Better plan has been sliced, it has been diced, things have been removed, it's been re-added, and all because 2 Democratic senators don't like the price tag because, well, their ambassadors don't like the price tags. Keep in mind, Manchin is owned by the coal industry. Where he's at is the coal industry. There's coal miners and industries, and they have bought Manchin, and Manchin has stock in those companies. He's bought and paid for. Sinema's the same way. She is lobbied by corporate interests, so therefore she does not like the idea of taxes being raised on corporations and rich people. So you can already tell where their loyalties lie. So what does this basically mean? This basically means that now the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill will be headed to Biden's desk to sign. However, they say that they are beginning the voting measures for the Build Back America plan. Supposedly, Sinema is now on board. Manchin, who is still making the rounds, saying that, well, he needs the specifics, which he sounds no different than he did 4 months ago about all this. Well, we need to see the numbers. We need to see the details. I know stalling when I see it, and Manchin is stalling. That's just honesty. Now, will this Build Back Better plan ever get passed? Maybe. But again, I'm going to point this out to everybody, that there wasn't a vote on this until the idea that Republicans could have governors in New Jersey, in Virginia, and possibly a mayor in one of the most liberal states in the U.S., New York City, that was the only thing that got Democrats to go, oh crap, we need to pass this now. So again, a lot of people are going to be looking at the Democrats like, wait a second. You guys got scared into almost facing and still could be facing, a very difficult 2022 midterm election season. The fact that you guys almost got scared is the only reason that you guys voted to get this passed. That's not coincidence, folks. That's literally what happened. Is that at a Republican election where they got some victories, next day Democrats voted. This does not instill confidence in the American people and Democrats right now. It doesn't, because it was a scare that their jobs will be lost that they decided to finally do right by the American people, and that should tell you a lot. But again, I guess we shouldn't be surprised by this, because the Build Back Better plan is still up for grabs. They still have removed things. They say that they removed family leave, now family paid back leaves into it. They said that they removed parts of Medicare, now parts of Medicare are back into it. But the things that are not back into it, which is still amazing to me, is that tuition-free community college is still out. And for the simple fact of the matter is childcare. Childcare has been taken out. But you still have the reduced tax credit. The child tax credit that was supposed to be extended for 3 years is still in for another year. This I just do not understand. But again, I said this before, if the Democrats don't get something done and get a lot more than the Build Back Better plan done with the time that they have before 2022, Republicans will pounce. They've already pounced. I mean, that's how the governor in Virginia won. Because, again, Democrats have focused on the wrong things. I mean, there was a lot of plans that they really wanted to do. Well, some of them that are very progressive. But let's be honest, in America, progressive ideas really don't get traction because progressive ideas, they scare the standard. Really, the new Green Deal about cutting carbon emissions, cutting down, gases and things of that nature, reducing our dependency on oil and actually increasing our needs of renewable energy and solar and water and wind turbines, scares the energy industry. More importantly, it scares big oil because big oil loves their profits. But if everybody's going green, that means big oil's profits are going to go down. In the same sense where we talk about doing our infrastructure, America's infrastructure is crumbling. And yes, the $1.2 trillion bill, infrastructure did get passed, but again, it took the Republicans to scare the Democrats into doing their job. Make it make sense, because honestly, it makes no sense to me. But that being said, guys, we're going to move forward to the Iman Arbery trial, and again, I wish I could make this up, but if you haven't heard the jury for the Ahmaud Arbery trial, keep in mind this is the trial that's going on in Georgia, where a young man was filmed, stalked, and killed by white terrorists. Yes, terrorists. Because only terrorists would stalk, film, and kill somebody, and then try to make it seem like they're trying to make it seem like they're defending themselves, like Kyle Rittenhouse. But again, the jury selection was done, and honestly, it's kind of shocking.
Potential jurors were selected in this murder case, and today we have 12. And as we mentioned, only one is black. The Superior Court Judge Timothy Walmsley, who will oversee the courtroom, has acknowledged, as Alex just said, that intentional discrimination by attorneys has been seen for those three defendants, appearing to have shaped the jury selection now, and it's already created quite a conversation and controversy there at the courthouse. ABC News contributor and host of the Law and Crime Network, Brian Buckmeyer, with us. He's going to be following the trial there in Georgia along with us. He is there. Brian, you were able to go inside that courtroom once for the jury selection. What do you think? Will this statement by the court, the judge, of intentional discrimination in any way directly impact the court's proceedings here?
So thank you for having me. It was actually interesting. I was there, as you said, for one day of the jury selection. I've been there for quite some time as well. I actually got to speak with Ahmaud Arbery's older aunt this morning. And when we talk about the jury selection process and what would have occurred yesterday, that being what's called a Batson challenge, where the prosecution said the defense collectively had 24 strikes, and 11 of those 24, almost half, were for African-American individuals. They challenged that and said there is bias here by the defense, And what the judge said is there are two steps to this. First, you have to see whether on its face there is some form of bias. And the judge actually, to his credit, I've never seen this from many judges, said, I see it. I can see what you're doing here, that you've asked questions of both white jurors and black jurors. There are more questions for the black jurors. And those jurors who said, I've seen a lot of this case, but I can put it to the side and still listen to the facts of the trial. The white jurors seemed to move on when the black jurors did not. And so the prosecution made the argument, and the judge, I think you can tell from his facial expressions, his tone, he was very cerebral when he said, the law of Georgia does not allow me to act. He said the first step of seeing whether or not there was bias, he said, I saw it there. I see what you're doing here, defense, but you have given non-race or race-neutral explanations for excluding them. And it almost seemed like he was saying, my hands are tied. I have to agree with you, defense attorneys, and I have to say that these jurors are not going to come into this trial.
Wow. Well, clearly race is already a key issue in this entire case. Do you think that the prosecution can use the judge's statements there as a weapon against the defense now? He clearly made his point.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen because this is a judicial ruling. I think we as a community and we as the media can talk about it and definitely highlight that he had some trouble with this decision. It didn't seem like one that he took lightly. And I think that they will maybe intertwine some of the racial aspects of this case into it, but I don't think they'll be able to use the actual judge's words in front of the jury. In Georgia, when they pick a jury, they have what's called a silent strike. It's almost like a silent auction, where the jurors are not actually hearing a lot of the arguments or even hearing who's being selected by the defense or the prosecution. So what we're talking about, they're not going to hear, and they didn't hear at the time of jury selection. So only we can see what's going on. But with most judges, they're humans like anyone else. And so you may see that maybe his rulings will go a little bit more to the prosecution throughout today. For example, two of the arguments today, the prosecution won both, where the defense were trying to bring in a use of force expert because Travis McMichael was a former U.S. Coast Guard for 10 years to try to corroborate what he did that day. That's not coming in. The other one is that there was a little bit of THC in Ahmaud Arbery's system, and the defense wanted to bring that in to show that he was aggressive or confrontational, had combative behavior because of that THC. The judge says that's not coming in either. And so you can kind of see the judge weighing the evidence and the facts here. And maybe yesterday's ruling weighed upon him, and he's kind of leaning a little bit more to the prosecution today. But I don't think that the actual information as his decision is going to be before the jury.
Final question, the evidence you're paying close attention to. Of course, there's that video that went viral. We've all seen it. Essential to this case, clearly. What else?
So there's that video. Definitely, I would say that those are the skeleton of this case. But when you start thinking of the tendons and the muscles that go along with it, it's also the body-worn camera video of the officers when Gregory McMichael is talking to the officers. He's telling them that he didn't necessarily see Ahmaud Arbery come out of the home, merely that he saw him running down the street. Now, that's important because we're thinking about citizen's arrest and self-defense. Now, the citizen's arrest law that they're going to be using in this case has been repealed and replaced. But because they were arrested at the time that it was enacted, they're going to argue the old citizen's arrest law, which they're allowed to. But that law even said you have to have a certain amount of information that a felony occurred. If you simply see an individual running down the street, that's not a felony. You could believe they may have been committed a crime beforehand, but that body-worn camera tells us that he didn't. The other major issue is 3 shots went off. And the big question that I think most of our viewers have to listen to in this trial is whether or not that shotgun is semi-automatic or pump action. Semi-automatic, maybe Travis McMichael can argue, hey, in the heat of the moment, it went off 3 times. But if that gun is a pump action shotgun and he had to pump it each time to shoot Ahmaud Arbery, the second and third shot could land Travis McMichael in malice murder territory, which is a top charge that the McMichaels are facing.
Well, Brian Buckmeyer, I know you'll be with us as we follow this trial. Appreciate your time today.
Okay, so that was a lot. So again, the first thing we need to keep in mind now that we're talking about the jury. The jury is consisted of 12 white women, 1 white man. I'm sorry, that's wrong. 12 white women, 3 white men, 1 black person. Let me stress this again. In the Ahmaud Arbery trial, the jury itself, 12 white women, 3 white men, 1 black person. I don't think you guys notice, but when you are enabled to a fair trial by the jury of your peers. If we take into account the current jury right now for the Ahmaud Arbery, they are not a jury of his peers, and a lot of people are really disappointed. And I'm gonna be honest. Yes, the jury should reflect more black people. I'll be the first person to say it. Why is that? Because again, how many times in the history books have we seen black people being put on trial, and when a black person's on trial, is not the jury all white? I mean, we can go down there are plenty of cases out there where, especially in the South, where a black person was on trial and the jury was all white, and there was nothing we could do about it at the time because at the time the racial tensions, Jim Crow laws. I can keep going down the rack. Now, supposedly we're in better times. Ahmaud Arbery himself is not here to defend himself. That black man is not here to defend himself because 3 white men decided to end his life. At the same time, the jury itself, and this is what worries me. This is honestly what worries me in court cases like this. Because number one, I told you guys this a long time ago. I'll still say it now. Whenever a person of color is either their case, whenever they're being tried in a case, or whenever they are the victim of someone else who's also being tried in a case, the first thing they always do, character assassination. Because they have to somehow, and this is a defense tactic, that somehow they have to make the victim look like somehow whatever actions in life led to their demise. You heard it already. You heard already from the ABC News journalists that they're trying to sit there and say there was a little bit of THC in Ahmaud Arbery's system. THC, marijuana. Let me tell you something about marijuana. I don't smoke it, but I do study the plant. I do study the effects of the plant through various medical journals. Here's the thing. THC can do a lot of things. It can relax you, it can calm you, it can help you sleep. It actually has helped in multiple medical applications as far as calming down nerves, reducing seizures, helping out with constant nerve pain or headaches or migraines, things of that nature. What THC doesn't do is doesn't make you aggressive. Ask anybody who was a fan of ganja. They will tell you off the bat, you will be very hard pressed to find a person who's high, who's angry. It'll do a lot of things, but usually the side effects, as Cat Williams used to love to say, is hungry, happy, sleepy. That's it. There is no. It's like you expect THC to do the same things that meth and fentanyl will do. Meth laced with fentanyl will do. No. All THC does is exactly what it's said to do. Hungry, happy, sleepy. So, how does this relate to Ahmaud Arbery? It's how they muddy the waters. It's how they try to make it seem like, oh, he's not the spit shine clean image that the prosecution wants to point him out to be. They're muddying the waters, and of course the intentional discrimination, which the judge did point out, because it is intentional discrimination, because you're putting in, and again, it is a game of just getting. It's like whenever defense and prosecution get together for jury selection, let's be honest, it's like having your favorite crowd in. And that's lawyer strategy 101. You want the jury who's going to be the most sympathetic to your case. That's the truth. That's how it usually works. So of course for the defense, they're trying to get in enough people who are going to be on the same mindset as those three men that killed Ahmaud Arbery. And the prosecution is hoping to get more people of color in there, as they should. But again, with laws in Georgia, which I keep on saying, guys, I said this all the time, laws do matter whatever state that you're in, because they shape so many things. And the laws in Georgia are exactly that. That the simple fact of the matter is, and the judge who sat there and said the laws of the state permit me to intervene in this. So even he knows it is messed up what the defense is trying to do, especially with the intentional discrimination. I'm gonna struggle with those two words, intentional discrimination, because again, the jury for the Ahmaud Arbery case, 12 white women, 3 white men, 1 black person. I am sorry, but the jury for the Ahmaud Arbery's case is not, above all else, a jury of his peers. But we're gonna follow that case as it goes along. Also, another thing about gun violence in America right now, I love playing this clip because again, people wonder about gun violence in America and why it's not being looked into. Well, I don't think you've ever heard of this. It's called the Dickey Amendment.
There are now some 40 million handguns
Firearm
in this country.
injuries represent an epidemic in the United
of
States.
gun violence.
Join us in this campaign to reduce gun violence.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun,
another mass shooting
is
in America.
a good guy with
Shooting
a gun.
rampage.
316 people are shot every single day.
Gun violence, a topic that's deeply divisive in America, a country where guns are embedded in everyday life. As of 2018, it was estimated that there are approximately 400 million civilian-owned guns in America. That means there are more guns than there are people or cars in the US. By comparison, Americans own more guns per capita than any other country, accounting for about 40% of the world's total gun ownership. And that number is likely to increase. Since 2008, the US firearm industry's worth grew 232%, making it a $63.5 billion industry in 2020. But the reason for division over gun ownership isn't just because the US owns the most guns. It's because it also has the highest rate of mass shootings, gun-related homicides, and firearm suicides among similarly developed nations.
Our politics is just not being incentivized to pay attention to the things that would actually reduce gun violence.
This is the job of public health, to help the most vulnerable, to stand up for them.
So how did we get here? How has the right to own a gun become a divisive American ideal? And of all the proposed solutions, what do experts say could effectively reduce gun violence in the US? Around the 19th century, there were at least 9 countries that had the right to bear arms in their constitution. But as years passed, most of these countries made changes revoking or limiting gun rights. As of 2021, only 3 countries cite the right to bear arms in their constitution, and the United States is one of them.
The Second Amendment activism was not at the center of early gun culture, and for a long time, most people in the US owned guns, but it was really for hunting, target shooting. It was associated with masculinity, so it was kind of a rite of passage, but it was not about rights and the law.
The idea of gun control didn't really enter the national conversation until 1934, following a mass shooting in Chicago. Most gun regulation laws were passed without much opposition until 1968, when President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Gun Control Act. But this started to change years later when the NRA became an advocacy organization centered on the Second Amendment, bringing with it a huge influx of money.
It really changed after the Cincinnati Revolt in 1977 when there was a coup inside of the NRA. Second Amendment activists took the NRA over, and then in the 2000s it switched again to being a mostly Republican gun lobbying organization.
Nowadays, the NRA spends between $2 to $5 million annually lobbying for gun rights. And during the 2020 elections alone, the association spent $29 million in political campaigns.
And we believe in freedom and liberty and the right to keep and bear arms.
In 1983, the CDC really started looking at gun violence as a public health problem when they created the Violence Epidemiology Branch.
The NRA looked at this and they said, if you do this research, it's going to end up in everyone losing their guns. It's either the research or your guns. You can't have both. You've got to decide. This was misinformation, but it was a powerful strategy for the NRA.
Eventually, Congress deferred funding for gun violence research by passing the Dickey Amendment in 1996. Which prohibited the CDC from using federal funding to advocate or promote gun control. After its implementation, the CDC spent more than 20 years without the resources to conduct significant research on gun violence.
It was a threat. It was a shot across the bow.
That had big impacts, particularly in the field of data collection. If you're getting your data collection done by, a private foundation or some other source, you don't have what researchers have described to me as the full faith and credit of the US government behind it. That makes it easier if you have that full faith and credit to get agencies and get states on board and get that data collected.
The need for research was finally recognized shortly after the mass school shooting in Parkland, Florida, that left 17 dead in 2018. A clarification was made to the Dickey Amendment, allowing the CDC to conduct research on the causes of gun violence.
This research is going to find those ways that we can keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them without infringing on the rights of those people who should.
But in order to understand how we can potentially reduce gun violence, let's first dive into the numbers around it. Each year, approximately 40,000 people die in America from firearm injuries. The U.S. saw the peak of gun ownership in 1993, with an estimated 51% of households owning a gun. That same year, gun homicides also reached its peak.
When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you have easy access to guns and you have lots of guns available to you, more problems look like problems that can get solved with them. There very much is a correlation between the number of guns in a place and the number of gun deaths in a place. And that's something that you can see consistently across the board year after year. The places that have more guns have more gun deaths.
But if you look at just the injuries and deaths, you're missing a very big part of the problem. For every individual life that's destroyed, there's a family that's destroyed. There's a community that's shattered. The cost of anxiety, of fear and worry is tremendous.
And while most gun owners cite safety and protection as their reason for owning a firearm, research shows that having a gun in your home doesn't necessarily keep you safer.
What we found was that not only does having a gun in your home not make you safer, but it increases the risk that someone in your family will be killed by a gun, will be a victim of gun homicide, and it increases it hugely. Not by 10, 15, 20, 25%, not by 100%, by 200%. The risk that someone in your family will be shot and killed with a gun triples. And the risk that someone in your family will commit suicide with a gun goes up 400%. It's multiplied 5-fold.
And suicides make up the largest portion of firearm deaths.
2/3 of all gun deaths in America are suicides. And most of the people that are killing themselves with guns in the US are older white men who are gun owners. Then you have another 1/3 that are homicides. When you're talking about the homicides, you're predominantly talking about younger black men. And when you talk about women being killed in homicides, you're predominantly talking about domestic violence.
When we shift to mass shootings, they only account for a small percentage of gun deaths each year, but they've also become more common and more deadly in recent years.
The politics of gun violence has, over the last couple decades, really centered around things like mass shootings, terrorism, accidental gun deaths in small children. But if you actually go and look at the data, again, what you find is that those are not making up the majority of gun violence deaths. They're not even making up a significant minority.
ABC News combined forces with the Gun Violence Archive to document a week's worth of gun violence and found that in a single week in July 2021, there were more than 1,000 incidents of gun violence across 47 states. That's about 1 every 10 minutes. And in those incidents, more than 400 people were killed. Despite the gap in federal research, limited data shows that implementation of certain gun regulations and laws have been effective at a state level. For example, in Indiana, the red flag law has been associated with a 7.5% reduction in firearm suicides a decade after it was implemented. Even other methods, like permit laws or ceasefire programs, have had some success in individual cities. But the research is mixed. One study found that states can reduce homicide rates just by implementing 3 laws.
Universal background checks are laws that prevent anyone with a criminal record from buying a weapon. May-issue laws give discretion to the police to actually refuse to issue a concealed carry permit. Violent misdemeanor laws basically prevent someone who has been convicted of an interpersonal violence misdemeanor from buying a gun. We found that a combination of all 3 laws reduced firearm homicide rates by 29%. In 2019, it means that 4,200 people would have been saved.
But none of these methods on their own are perfect. And as some states loosen the reins on gun regulation, expanding the research on gun violence could be our most useful tool in reducing it.
Having more consistent data and more long-term sets of data, those things really can help us find solutions.
Most gun owners actually support gun violence prevention laws. Over 90% of gun owners support universal background checks. They overwhelmingly support violence misdemeanor laws, red flag laws. And really what's interesting is that they don't know that others do. They're influenced by hearing the vocal minority all the time.
We can find ways to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them without infringing on the rights of law-abiding gun owners. And that gives us so many ways forward if we work on it together, if we use the science, and if we focus on prevention. This is a problem we can solve.
And they're absolutely right. It comes down to the whole idea of how gun violence and how it's handled and things of that nature. And of course, the Dickey Amendment, which pretty much prevented the CDC from using any government funds to study gun violence. And that used to be the standard for a long time. And trust me, as a person who owns guns, I get the whole idea of safety. Now, of course, they are speaking from the side of gun violence, and I'm speaking from the side of gun ownership. That yes, as long as you have training, and I stress this very heavily, that if you own firearms, please go through training and constantly go through training. Don't just take 1 or 2 classes and think you're great. No. As I've learned from many firearm instructors, it's all about safety, it's all about training, it's all about discipline, because that's the whole idea of the other side of it. Now, don't get me wrong, we do need to study mental health issues along with firearms and how they're able to get in the hands of people, but the truth is, for the simple fact of the matter is, there are some laws that need to be put in place. Universal background checks, that is one of them. Trust me, as a guy who used to go to gun trade knife shows, I cannot tell you how easy it is for anybody with money to go to these shows and get a firearm. Trust me, I promise you, especially in Tennessee, where they usually have gun trade knife shows, no background checks are ever done. I can witness that to a T. As long as you have the money, it's like, okay, here you go, and you're out the door. Congratulations, you're now a gun owner. That's how it usually. That's how it works in Tennessee. And keep in mind, Tennessee no longer, in my home state of Tennessee, they don't have laws for concealed carry. You can conceal carry as you can right now. Now, granted, you can't walk into bars and things of that nature with your firearm, but around town, you do not need a permit to carry anymore. Texas, they're about to throw that. Texas, North Carolina, they're about to throw out that law too, where you don't need a permit to conceal carry. Don't get me wrong. Like I said before, I am a gun owner and I understand it, but there is a huge responsibility to owning firearms, and I do mean a huge responsibility, because especially if you have a family living in the same house where your guns are, you have a responsibility, and that responsibility is paramount. Because yes, having a gun in the house with kids does mean a higher risk of someone finding that gun and shooting it if it's not stored properly, locked up properly, made sure that it's devoid of ammo and things of that nature. Yes, the danger for that kind of stuff to happen is there. But as far as the violence itself of gun violence, yes, it needs to be studied. Yes, we need to find more solutions. But some solutions are already out there that we need to implement. But the whole taking your guns thing, people who always say that, well, first was Obama's coming to take your guns, then Hillary's going to come take your guns, then Biden's going to take your guns. You think at some point where someone going, nobody's going to come take our guns. You're exactly right. So why are you going to listen to somebody that's going to sit there and say, well, they're coming to take your guns? They're never coming to take your guns. Trust me, if they were coming to take your guns, you would be seeing all sides of the armed forces be at your door, because they know you're armed and they're armed, and they're going to come in there by force if they're really going to take your guns. But newsflash to all the ammosexuals out there, nobody's coming to take your guns. But on top of that, I'm still wondering why you have well over, and don't get me wrong, I understand the whole idea of collecting guns, but if you have somewhere between the numbers of 100 pieces of 100 guns and up, yeah, you should be put on a list. Very much so, because I will never understand. Maybe I can understand maybe having, I'll even go on a limb. I'll even say maybe 10, maybe 15, but 100? Dude, nobody's going to be invading your house anytime soon when you have over 100 guns. That's all I'm saying. And, maybe 10 or so, because there are some pieces out there I do like and I do want to keep. Understand that. But if you're a collector, kind of different. But if you're just keeping guns just because you can, yeah, you should be put on a list. I'll be the first person to say it. But anyway, again, guys, I want to bring this up about the New Jersey race, because they finally it was too close to call, but actually the Democrats were able to pull this out.
Changing political landscape, Democrats have pulled off a narrow victory in the governor's race in New Jersey after a bruising defeat in Virginia. ABC News projects incumbent Phil Murphy has won re-election by a paper-thin margin over Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli. Murphy is the state's first Democratic governor in 44 years to get a second straight term, but he was widely expected to win by double digits. Murphy used his victory speech to call on people to come together.
And New Jersey, I hear you. So tonight, I renew my promise to you, whether you voted for me or not, to work every single day of the next 4 years to keep moving us forward.
Murphy's close race and Terry McAuliffe's loss to Republican Glenn Youngkin in Virginia is largely being blamed on President Biden's sagging approval ratings and his stalled domestic agenda in Congress. Biden himself acknowledged that Democrats in control need to produce results for the American people.
Well, here's the problem with that statement. Yes, in a state where Biden did actually win by double digits, it wasn't because it was because of the fact that, let's be honest, Trump had rubbed a lot of people raw. But at the same time, guys, you guys also got to remember they're trying to blame this on Biden's agenda. No, if we're blaming it on the agenda, let's blame it on the fact that Democrats have not got anything done until they got scared out of their jobs. That's a big difference. But again, they're probably wondering for a state that Biden won by double digits, why was it so close? Because Republicans know how to stir the pot. They know how to sit there and say, well, the Democrats have had a similar, they've had the House, they've had the Senate, and now they got the presidency. What have they done? What have they done for you lately? That's what it's been. Hey, sounding Janet Jackson, but what have you done for me lately? Because again, the Democrats did run on this policy of, oh, we're going to get rid of Trump. We're going to implement a minimum wage increase. We're going to finally go after we're finally going to implement stuff for the American people instead of these rich people corporations. And yet, almost 8 months later, you just now got to the heart of what your Build Back America plan was. And a lot of people do listen to Republicans. Their spending's out of control. Not forgetting the fact that Republicans have spent out of control, very much so. And under every Republican presidency, the economy is tanked. It's history. Feel free to look it up. But again, Republicans know how to stir the pot. And when you stir pot, especially those in rural areas, they will come out and vote Republican because it sounds good. Because people do have a slight amnesia problem when it comes to Republicans. And that is exactly why they pounced on the opportunity that Democrats were not getting anything done. And at the same time, Republicans are like, this is what you voted for. Now you're going to vote for us. You're going to keep voting for people who aren't going to do anything. Again, it's this whole idea of what have you done for me lately? And of course, they're going to have a hard time trying to keep that together, considering the fact of the matter that, again, midterms are coming up in 2022. And if you don't think Republicans are waiting for this, they are. And if you don't think that somehow Donald Trump is not in prison by 2024, he will run again, and almost assuredly he will have the Republican nomination if he's not in jail. I keep on saying this. He's been ducking and pushing back his court cases. He's involved in multiple lawsuits. I feel sorry for his lawyers for Donald Trump. Must be thinking it's Christmas because of how many hours they're billing him. Because Donald Trump is not broke, not by any means. He does have some money, not the money he claims to have, but he does have some money because them lawyers ain't working pro bono. Not on his multiple cases. But again, you don't think for 1 second that if Trump is still free by 2024 that he won't run? Oh, he'll run. And the sad part is, not only will he run, the Republican Party will be behind him. Why? Because a lot of the people that he's actually endorsing are getting into these positions. The same way that all these Supreme Court justices put in, they will bend the knee. Trust me on that. That's the thing that we should all be very, very concerned about. So, as we're getting to the end of our podcast, guys, I did want to cover this story just because I find it interesting because, a lot, especially with the strikes and stuff going on, that some companies are thriving and some companies are not doing so well. Like FedEx and UPS. Like FedEx is doing terrible, but UPS is doing great. I wonder why.
The labor shortage nationwide is hitting your holiday shopping hard. On the road and in the air, it's a tale of two delivery companies between UPS and FedEx. According to ShipMatrix, FedEx's on-time delivery rate has fallen to 85% for both express and ground packages. FedEx says thanks to the labor shortage, it was hit with $450 million in extra costs last quarter. The company specifically pointing to higher wages and increased transportation expenses. That higher price tag for FedEx is caused in large part from hiring independent contractors who drive and deliver individual packages to your doorstep, employing non-union drivers for that last mile of delivery.
What happens is they're outsourcing essentially delivery to about a little over 5,000 different small companies that in turn go hire workers, and have to obtain equipment.
The FedEx president explaining the current labor environment is driving inefficiencies in the operations of our networks and significantly impacting our financial results. Meanwhile, at UPS, on-time package delivery sits 10% higher at 95%, according to ShipMatrix. Unlike FedEx, UPS uses its own unionized drivers, and experts say it offers some of the highest wages and best benefits in the country.
With UPS having more benefits for employees in the long run, does that work in their favor when it comes to the company delivering more on time?
I think in a period of sustained high demand, yes, because you have a much more stable workforce. And so one of the challenge even can be as one FedEx ground company that's providing that service can actually poach workers from a different FedEx ground company. It's no different if one McDonald's is poaching employees from another McDonald's.
UPS also tells NBC News they're pushing their biggest retail customers to offer Black Friday discounts early to alleviate the pressure on both delivery workers and customers.
We had customers that last Friday ran their Black Friday sales, and that obviously helps us pull some of the pressure off of the peakiest of peak days before the holiday.
Regardless of which shipping company is transporting your orders, the refrain this holiday season is act early to avoid that last-minute crunch.
We get a package, we deliver it. However, you are definitely risking things as you would at any time by waiting to the last minute. You do not want to procrastinate.
Joe joins us now from Los Angeles. Joe, you mentioned the lesson there for shoppers. Don't wait until the last minute. But are there lessons for employers in this story as well? And what about workers themselves? Millions of people have been quitting their jobs in the last few months.
Yes, the great resignation. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that job seekers are very much in the driver's seat. What you know is what's out there. There's all kinds of benefits, competitive wages, and workers are looking for a sustainable lifestyle, work that is actually good for them and their home life. And so there's a lot of choice out there, and employers are having to be extra aggressive in competing for the best talent across the board, no matter if you're talking about blue collar work, white collar work, or something in between. Allison.
All right, Jolene.
Oh, yes, there is a big difference. There's a big difference between FedEx and UPS. As you probably heard in the video, FedEx blamed higher wages, but the higher wages was for independent contractors to deliver their mail. They didn't say that they were paying their employees more. Keep in mind, FedEx doesn't have a union. They don't. It's one of the very many companies out there that don't have a union. So therefore, because of labor shortages, they went through third parties. Those third parties hired contractors, so higher wages. That's their excuse. Meanwhile, UPS, they have a union, and actually, as confirmed, their drivers get literally the highest wage rates in their industry, and they get benefits. So yes, it is amazing that FedEx, with their average shipping rate of 85%, UPS 95%. One has a union, the other one doesn't. One doesn't pay its workers, one does. Which one is the more successful company? I have said this once and I'll say it again. Unions work. Unions work. Corporations may hate this. That's the reason why corporations hate unions, because they have to answer to us. To keep in mind, when it comes to unions, yes, unions, for all those that don't know, kids, unions got you a 40-hour work week. Unions got you paid time off. Unions got you benefits. Unions have done so much more. But the top 4 things that you enjoy at every job came from unions. If it wasn't for them, corporations would run all over us. But again, with UPS, I point that out. Imagine what happens when you pay your drivers, or you pay your workers, or you make sure they're taken care of. When you invest in your workers, the company thrives. Imagine that. So, Again, with FedEx, I'm just not surprised about this because I said before, most companies, when they hear the word unions, they scatter. Again, why I usually sit there and say I use Michael Dell because Dell's the same way. I used to work for Dell, and Michael Dell hated the word union. If he ever found out that one of his locations was trying to form a union, he would close that location, release all those jobs, and send it somewhere else. Corporations hate unions. Even so much so, like it's like I talked about Starbucks this week. Starbucks is raising their prices, raising their rates to $15 an hour, sometimes almost up to 23 in some areas. And in 3 of their locations, they're talking of forming a union. And Starbucks will say, oh, well, at least the report from Starbucks was, oh, well, I mean, you guys can form a union, but why do you need to? Because you need as much leverage for the corporation you're working for as they already have on you. Unions, ladies and gentlemen, they work. Simple and plain. And you don't believe me? The tale of two companies. Look at UPS and look at FedEx to tell you everything you want to know. So, the last story I got before we get to our feel good segment, guys, I want to talk about this one really quickly, is that there is a report from CBS News that says credit reports dispute more common in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. Oh, you're gonna sit there and tell me that the credit bureau is literally against minorities? You don't say. So again, they sit there and said Americans living in predominantly Black neighborhoods around the U.S. are twice as likely to dispute a mistake on their credit report than people mostly in white neighborhoods. For anybody who's ever worked on their credit report, you already know the headache it can be. Especially in this case, they sat there and said that consumers from Black neighborhoods have had the highest dispute rate at 2.8% for car loans, 2.4% for student loans, and 4.7% on credit card accounts. That compares to the 0.8%, 0.9%, and 2.5% respectively for predominantly white communities. Hispanic neighborhoods have the second highest dispute rates at 1.3%, 1.3%, and 2.7% respectively. And again, for anybody that's ever worked on their credit report, you already know how much of a pain in the butt it is to actually get things done and get them fixed. This is why I say the credit bureaus need to go. And yes, we do need to go to a centralized credit bureau. I would be completely okay with that. I do believe that Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion are some of the most corrupted credit bureaus in history. Because have you ever tried to get something corrected on a credit report and the headache that it is to do that? I mean, yes, there are plenty of credit repair companies out there. They really are. But have you ever tried to fix your own credit report? It is time consuming, it takes a while, and it's a pain in the butt. But again, we've had a history of this. I mean, banks have preyed on minorities for the longest time, especially in the world of student loans. That's why I usually sit there and say that banks will deny you giving you a business loan to start your own business, but will gladly put you in debt in student loans because student loans, until they are forgiven, which they should be forgiven actually, they hang with us. Even through bankruptcies, they hang with us. Some of us never really do pay off our student loans. But again, that happens more with minorities than it does with white people. So again, what are we trying to say here in the world of credit? That there are some discrepancies, there is some discrimination, there is a lot of things that, again, these Democrats, which I can't knock them all. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have both sat there and said they wanted to curtail the credit bureaus. And even Biden has mentioned about, taking these companies and centralizing it into one actual credit bureau itself, which again, I'm all for. Because for the simple fact of the matter, guys, credit is king. I don't know, and I wish that, again, this goes back into a lot of things. A lot of us in our schools growing up were not taught literal finance. We were not taught credit cards. We were not taught taxes. We were not taught basic accounting. Why? Well, our public education was crappy. I'm just going to call it what it is. But that's the problem. That a lot of these schools, especially, the better the education, the more equipped the student's going to be. If you came from an education where it was not that good, then we don't find about things about in life that we should know until we're much older. But then again, we've already made some mistakes along the way. But again, the system is rigged as far as credit systems goes. And the only way that's going to be adjusted is that, again, Democrats, you have less than a year before you need to be worried about your jobs again, especially if you're in the center of the House. It's just that simple to finally get things passed, and it shouldn't take Republicans gaining ground for you to finally do your jobs. That's all I'm saying. But That being said, we're going to go, excuse me. That being said, we are going to move forward to our Feel Good News segment, because on How the Frack We Got Here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes make you lose your faith in humanity, but hey, it's the weekend. Some of us have to work, some of us haven't, but we try to enjoy ourselves, and hopefully this puts some spring in your step, a smile in your heart with these next 3 stories, especially the first one about a boy who literally has cancer and yet is thinking of others.
I'm not the only one. 7-year-old Akeem Mims from Akron, Ohio, in the fight of his life, but still thinking about others. Diagnosed with bone cancer, his dad, Rashawn, shaving his son's head, then shaving his own.
Now we're like twins.
Soon, he would begin chemo treatments at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And while there, Akeem had an idea.
Hey, Akeem, what you working on, man?
For all the kids on the floor.
Gift bags for all the kids on the floor?
Yeah.
Akeem making gift bags for the other children on his floor to let them know he's thinking about them. Stuffed animals and candy.
What you dropping in there right now?
Popcorn balls.
Nice.
Dozens of bags and new friends.
You're gonna make all these kids so happy tonight.
And the balloons.
They look good.
And right here tonight, Akeem and his father.
I passed out all the gift bags and hoping that the kids will feel better.
Akeem telling us he hopes it will help the other kids feel better too.
He really taught me that no matter what you're going through in life, there's always room to still spread positivity and spread joy throughout the world.
And tonight, we're happy to report Akeem now out of the hospital, now home, recovering until his next treatment. And doctors say his prognosis is good. And that is good news, Akeem.
And I thought that was just amazing. Just the simple fact of the matter is, this young man is battling cancer, and at the same time, still thinking about others. And again, I always said this before about random acts of kindness, that if you have the ability to make somebody's life great, whether it's a minute, a day, an hour, or a lifetime, go ahead and do that. The world could honestly use more random acts of kindness, and that young man is definitely one that's trying to spread cheer, and hopefully he will win. It's like, if his prognosis, they said prognosis on him beating his cancer was good, because honestly, F cancer. So I love that story. The simple fact of the matter is, there are people in their situations that refuse to be down and still want to be positive for others. I thought that was pretty cool. What was also pretty cool is, yes, in the pandemic, we have actually been secluded for the most part, especially from parents and their kids. And this one I'm going to show, I never thought I'd see a black mom do this. Is the first time one child was able to see her parents 2 years, and she walked up on her, and this was the reaction.
You have the boosties.
I mean, yes, I do. And a Philadelphia woman who had not seen her mom in Georgia for 2 years because of the COVID pandemic decided to surprise mom on her birthday while she was unloading groceries from the car. Take a look.
Oh, God. Oh.
Hey, Mom, can you pass me a bag?
No.
Can you pass me a bag? Okay, suffice it to say, Mom was shocked.
That was genuine.
I mean, I love the scream. She falls back into the car seat. Erica had tried to visit a couple of times before, but each time the pandemic spoiled her plans. But I would say that was worth the wait
look at
right
that.
there.
That was special.
Yeah.
All right, that was a good one on this Friday.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, just because, again, you haven't seen your parents in 2 years. You haven't seen your parents in 2 years of the academic, and I was like, how most parents are, where they haven't seen you. It's like, hey, Mom, can you pass me this? Her back was turning like, oh, yeah, sure, baby, hang on. And then she turned around and realized her child is right there. And of course, emotions and things of that nature. Let's be honest, if you got your parents still in your life, definitely check on them, hug on them, if you can. I mean, I know with pandemic, we gotta be a little bit careful, but, see them and, let them know that you care. And that moment like there where she can actually see her child, like I said, I thought that was pretty cool. The last story I got, guys, is, again, it's another cancer story where another child has beaten cancer, and I'm all for those stories because they make me feel great, and hopefully they'll make you feel great too. Shoot, if I beat cancer, I'll be dancing my ass off too. Yes, and I just like the fact of the matter is the 5-year-old, the father is definitely proud and happy that his 5-year-old is cancer free. And like I said, F cancer altogether, because I have seen the ugly side of that. And, you know, condolences to those that didn't make it, but we're definitely going to celebrate those that do make it. And I'm definitely going to celebrate that. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I appreciate it. Before I do get out of here, some shameless plugging I have to do. First, I'm going to talk about my brother, Big BZA Dot, my other podcast and brother in arms. He definitely has a few podcasts of his own. You can definitely check him out. Avon Westwood on Facebook, Big BZA Dot on all socials, in which his first show, Smoking Trailer Sundays, every Sunday from 6:30 to 9 p.m., in which he shows trailers of movies and video games he finds interesting and therefore wants to share them with you. I can't wait to see what he's got to say about Netflix's The Harder They Fall. Of course, he also has the REF podcast, like America's Funniest Home Videos, except done by World Star, every Tuesday from 6:30 to 9 p.m. He also has a video game channel called Making Plays, also on Facebook. And definitely check him out, like, share, and subscribe. Avon Westwood on Facebook, or Big BZA Dot on all socials. Also, shout out to Ari and Geek present Geek Salad, another podcasting brother of mine, for allowing me to share this podcast on your Facebook page. I certainly appreciate that. And also check them out, whether on Facebook or on YouTube. Ari and Geek present Geek Salad. They actually did just drop a new episode, which in their podcast is covering all things pop culture for the culture. You can definitely check them out, as they usually drop episodes every Friday. As far as yours truly, guys, the link at the bottom, you copy and paste that in your browser, will take you to my link tree that has all of my podcasts there for the Facebook and YouTube groups. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, and of course the All-Fun Podcast. Definitely like and share and subscribe from there. I would certainly appreciate that, as I hope these channels will grow. Of course, my Black Box channel, Blackbox447, which you can follow me there. I usually post movie reviews, sometimes video game reviews, sometimes inspirational stuff, and sometimes funny stuff. I like to think I'm funny, 2 out of 7 times. But definitely like and follow me there. Aside from that, guys, nothing's really changed. We will have an Off-Limits podcast later on this evening. It's gonna be really interesting, as the title just kind of clicked out to me after a certain Netflix special that I wanted to get out the way. But again, we're going to talk about that, but it's only for the grown and intended. But we'll also say this, guys. COVID-19 is still real. The deviance of it, the deviance. Thought of Marvel Eternal for a second. The deviance out there is still real. So I'm one of those ones where, please do your research. Ask doctors, ask nurses, ask healthcare professionals. Ask those who have done the work, who have the credentials, who have the scientific backing to give you the answers you need. And I hope that does lead to you getting vaccinated, because again, vaccinations work. And if you have got your vaccinated, please schedule to have your booster, because booster shots are going to be needed. And at the same time, guys, please wear a mask wherever you go, because again, the pandemic is still real. Yes, we are trying to combat it. Yes, we're trying to get our numbers down in hospitals and ICUs. But the only way we can do that is to protect ourselves. Because it's not just about you anymore. When you protect yourself, you protect others. And that's how we're going to get through this. That's literally it. Please do not take ivermectin, because again, ivermectin in doses. If you find ivermectin in a Tractor Supply house or a seed area or an Acme seed area, it's not for you. It's for animals. Just saying. Smaller doses. But the last thing I'll say about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to change minds, persuade people. We are simply trying to do what news stations of old try to do. Give you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind for yourself. We do a lot better as a society. We're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by doing the decisions that should have been done then, now. Like electing our first Madam Vice President who is black. Although I'm still hoping for Michelle to run in 2024, because Michelle, you are a national treasure, and we certainly could use your husband as Supreme Court Justice right now. Just saying. Aside from that, guys, thank you all for watching. If you're watching this on the playback, please comment if it's live. I still want to know exactly what you guys thought about everything we covered today. Aside from that, guys, take care of yourselves and each other, and we will all get through this. Peace.